welcome to Season 9 of 2000's Childhood Pop. My name is Mr. 96. And yeah, Season 9 ended up being in 2026 as this series skipped 2025 as a whole. I had my reasons for why I took a hiatus last year, but regardless, it would have taken a while to get to this episode in a timely manner. To be frank, writing for 2000's Childhood Pop has been tough. A lot of times, I know that not as many people are going to watch these videos since these songs are about 20 years old, but it's even worse when participation of the polls is so low I have to break ties between songs that got one vote each, like for the What You Got poll. And of the songs chosen, I decided to pick one that I won't say I'm an expert in, but I at least feel like it gives me something to talk about. Today, we are going to talk about the punk song that sparked a generation of rebellion and protest against the Bush administration. Okay, that didn't happen, but at the very least, it's a neat song to listen to. If you know me, I like to go into the history of why certain events happen and what we can learn from them. So let's look into why American Idiot, as well as its namesake album, are still remembered to this day. This song was suggested to me by Emma B on Patreon about a year ago. Sorry for the delay. If you want to suggest 2000 songs for me to review, stay tuned until the end of the video. I'll admit that rock is not a strong subject of mine, so I'm not going to go too deeply into Green Day's history because I'm not the best source for that. I mean, yeah, I know of their classic songs nowadays like anyone else, but if you want a clear arc of their artistic growth and such, I'm not the best for a micro view. For me, the American Idiot album was my only exposure to Green Day as a kid. The songs were all over the radio, and many of them are still beloved to this day. It wasn't until the 2010s that I discovered their early stuff, like Dookie or Good Riddance Time of Your Life, so it shocked me to learn that there was a whole decade of fandom that existed before American Idiot. When it comes to fandoms, there are some people who will tell you that Meteora is one of Linkin Park's worst albums, which I heavily disagree with, but those people exist. You can find plenty of 90s kids who worship Dookie and say that American Idiot was a sellout record, but it says a lot that the band today performs their American Idiot tracks just as often, if not more, than their Dookie tracks. While Dookie had higher commercial sales, American Idiot has built its own legacy of being one of the few commercially successful anti-war albums during the Bush era. Don't wanna be an American Idiot! I was not old enough to follow the political landscape of the early 2000s. Hell, I didn't even know about 9/11 until years later when I watched an episode of Reading Rainbow in about 03 or 04. But if the Hot 100 was anything to go by, it seems like the early 2000s were dominated by conservative, pro-war viewpoints. 'Cause we'll put a boot in your ass, it's an American way. I genuinely despise pro-war music from this era, not just because the war was an objective disaster, but because the American public who liked this were idiots who thought war would be fun. Look, it's been 23 fucking years since Bush declared war in Iraq. Do Republicans still justify it, or can they finally admit it was a mistake? My guess is that they'll never admit any mistake because they elected a convicted felon, yet they'll still somehow complain that the media doesn't like them when they have all the money and political power. If the Super Bowl controversy in 2004 was anything to go by, I think it's fair to say conservatives dominated the political discourse during the 2000s. And honestly, I'd say not much has changed in 2026. Maybe that's why I enjoy stories in fictional universes, that way I don't have to deal with the background context of real-world sexism and racism. I mean, those stories still have racism, but, fantasy racism that you help alleviate by the end. But the sad thing about our real world is that the Iraq War did not harm the Bush administration. In fact, it strengthened it because it gave people an excuse to re-elect him in 2004. We're in the middle of a war. We can't have a change in leadership during a war that he unambiguously started last year. That's why despite this series being named 2000's Childhood Pop, I've always made it clear that this is not me glorifying this decade because I would never want to experience this era of politics ever again. If anything ruined Bush's reputation to the people at large, it was his Hurricane Katrina response, but by that point he was already in his second term, so it's not like people could vote him out of office or anything. So yeah, those are my current thoughts on the next 3 years. I guess that takes me to my next point, which is that it's hard to tell what kind of music actually moves people or leaves a legacy. I mean, the most impactful song from 2024, in my eyes, was Not Like Us by Kendrick Lamar, since everyone and their grandmas talked about it. But if you look at the year-end Hot 100, the #1 hit was this song that I forgot existed because I heard no one talk about it in any way. Good? Bad? I don't know. I had to look this up because I forgot what it sounded like. And that's why I find it hard to use the Hot 100 or music charts as a way to accurately gauge how people were feeling during an era. In the 2000s, this was especially true because chart numbers were still determined by physical media sales. So while the kids may have been listening to Backstreet Boys and Papa Roach, the adults who bought music were listening to Faith Hill and Jagged Edge. It's the same as how 80s punk was rebellion against the Thatcher and Reagan eras on each side of the pond, yet when you think of the 80s today, you think of bright colors and happy shit. Yet despite protest music tending to be forgotten, people still love American Idiot to this day, which has to say something. So maybe the legacy of American Idiot isn't its cultural influence, but just its existence as a good cathartic critique of the Bush era, arguably the only good one at the time. I mean, it's not like it had any real competition. What, were you gonna listen to Madonna's American Life? Fuck no. And American Idiot still holds up very well just by the fact that it can easily apply to the current era. In fact, Billy Joe Armstrong just changes the second verse lyric from redneck to MAGA during any modern day performances. I'm not a part of a redneck agenda. I'm not a part of a MAGA agenda. It also says a lot that this song, of all Green Day songs, is performed quite often to this day. If you look at the Hot 100, American Idiot the song didn't chart very high, especially compared to the other singles off the album such as Boulevard of Broken Dreams, Holiday, or even Wake Me Up When September Ends. The latter three managed to make the year-end Hot 100 for 2005 while American Idiot didn't, which is odd since it seems the title track has sort of outlived the other songs. American Idiot wasn't just about the war in particular, it was also about the role of the media in controlling the narrative. Don't want a nation under the new media. In many ways, it reminds me of another early 2000s project that was ahead of its time, Metal Gear Solid 2. When people talk about their favorite MGS games, they usually talk about 1 or 3, but 2 is the one that ironically aged the best because Kojima was talking about stuff like free will, echo chambers, and fake news way before the age of social media and AI. But American Idiot continues to age like fine wine, from rednecks calling Billy Joe the F-word, well maybe I'm the faggot America, to paranoia being the predominant mood of our lives. And sing along to the age of paranoia. Now even with all of this being said, I'm not going to claim that this is the most cutting commentary on Bush-era politics. If anything, it's quite tame. Then again, it just goes to show how conservative America was that this sounded punk by comparison. But most importantly, the song just kicks ass. It's going out to Idiot America. It's the title track from an album full of great songs, and it's a fun jam for a time when life wasn't fun, which is probably why people still like it today. And of course, we have to thank American Idiot for the Weird Al parody Canadian Idiot. They think their silly accent is so cute. Can't understand a thing they're talking about. Weird Al is a national treasure. And international treasure. Once again, I would like to thank Emma B for suggesting this awesome song, as it ended up being incredibly fitting for the times. And if you want to suggest 2000 songs for me to review, you can join my wonderful patrons on Patreon. For just $1 per video, you can join my patron-only Discord server where we chat and chill, and at $2 per video, you get to vote on what songs I review for my series 2000s Childhood Pop. At $5 per video, you get to be listed in my Names of Fame, and at $10 per video, you get a personal shout through the heart along with Casey Volante, Jason Semler, and Prideful Zella. Once again, I'm Mr. 96. If you want to see more pop reviews, click the subscribe button below and tap that bell to be notified when I drop a new episode. If you don't know, I just turned 30 recently, so this feels like the start of a new era. After a year off, it was nice to make videos again. Pop songs may come in numbers, but there's only one, 96.